Toys R Us has officially gone out of business, buried next to Blockbuster and Radio Shack. Its loss brings with it the harsh reminder that yet another fond memory of our childhood is never to be savored again. There are others that are shocked that it held out for as long as it did. One thing we can all agree on, though, that even though the franchise is gone, the skeletal remains of empty stores still linger like relics of a forgotten era. So, before another Walmart goes in, let's enjoy those black holes of memory. These are Creepy Toys R Us Stories Part 2. If you missed out on Part 1, a link will be available in the description. My twin sister and I rent a small house at the end of a cul-de-sac. Beyond the tree line in our backyard is a chain link fence, and behind that fence is a closed-down Toys R Us store. Now, I don't recommend that anyone else try this, as it's technically trespassing, but ours is a unique situation, and we couldn't resist taking advantage of it. When big franchise stores go out of business, they liquidate all their stock. Most of it gets heavily discounted for the sake of clearing the shelves, while some of the nicer stuff gets packed up and shipped off to warehouses, where I'm sure they will be sold online, but quite a bit of it is just junked. My sister and I would just watch as employees would exit out of the back and dump load after load of merchandise into the dumpsters. Keep in mind that none of it is great quality stuff. In fact, it's mostly cheap stuff. But the way I see it, once it's in the dumpster, it's trash, and it's free. After business hours, my sister and I would wheel our rolling suitcase back through the trees, sneak through the opening in the fence, and go dumpster diving. We found a few neat things. Mostly posters and displays for video games, some cheap action figures and dolls, and a few board games and damaged boxes. We would collect it all, put it all in our suitcases, then head back home. Now, given that we are in our 20s, we knew that we shouldn't have been doing this, but we couldn't resist saving all this cool stuff that was just going to rot away in a landfill anyway. Most of it we kept, and some we gave away to friends, but we didn't resell any of it online or anything. After we had gone dumpster diving about 7 or 8 times, I was getting tired of it. There's always actual trash in the dumpster as well that we would have to sort through, including old food. Ugh. I once had a fly buzz right into my mouth. Needless to say, I was ready to call it quits on the whole thing, but my sister pressured me into doing it one last time. Normally, we would go at dusk, stay for about 20 minutes or so, and then leave. We didn't like going after nightfall because then we would need flashlights, and that would draw too much attention to ourselves. The final time we went was already after dark, mostly because I had procrastinated as I didn't really want to go. When my sister and I slipped through the opening in the fence, I handed her one of those tiny keychain flashlights and told her to keep it handy while she looked around. She hopped into the dumpster and started digging through the junk, which I recall was just mostly shelving and a few of those plastic displays for posters. I was casually pacing back and forth, watching the area around us, and taking the stuff she handed to me and tossing it into a bag. For the record, neither of us had been drinking, we weren't carrying any weapons, and we weren't acting obnoxious and drawing attention to ourselves. We were barely talking. Yeah, we were trespassing. But that alone isn't enough of a crime for what was about to come. After about 10 minutes, I told my sister that it was time to go. She was making too much noise shifting around those shelves, and I was worried about getting caught. I was zipping up the bag when I heard the chain link fence rattle back around where the opening was. Now, in retrospect, this may have had nothing to do with what was about to happen, but a part of me still thinks it's connected. I didn't have a flashlight, so I couldn't glance over into the area to investigate, but I had entered through that fence often enough to know what it sounded like when someone passed through it, and this sounded like that exactly. I started tapping the side of the dumpster, telling my sister to hurry up. She pulled out a cracked Iron Man mask and handed it to me, and then began to crawl out of the dumpster. Right as her feet touched the pavement, the lid of the dumpster swung down hard and slammed itself right on her fingers. The sound of the lid falling that hard was like a bomb going off. I jumped about a foot into the air. My sister cried out in pain and cursed. The next thing we knew, there was what sounded like a war cry coming from behind the dumpster. A man steps out from behind the dumpster and swings one of those retractable nightsticks right at my head. It was pure luck that I chose that moment to step backwards and dodge the blow. The baton made a loud clinging sound against the dumpster. The guy screamed like a madman and swung again. I yelled for my sister to run. We abandoned the suitcase. We both sprinted towards the front of the building. The guy started sprinting after us, screaming in a language that wasn't English or Spanish. At first, he was right on our heels, but my sister and I were both in pretty good shape, so after a few moments we left the guy in the dust. Fortunately, we were both in our sneakers that night. The man then hurled his baton at us, and it clattered across the pavement to my right, but we kept running. Once around the front of the building, we began sprinting to the road and the crosswalk. The guy turned the corner and slammed right into one of those freestanding cement poles that are normally located by the entrance to prevent cars from plowing right through the doors. I glanced over my shoulder and I saw him hit the ground, but the man got right back up, like he barely felt it, and kept running. When we made it to the intersection, I shoved my sister in the direction of our house and told her to keep running. This is the part that blows my mind. Not only was the man still chasing us, but he was still screaming at the top of his lungs and wielding a stun gun in each hand, both of which were buzzing loudly as he ran. And I neglected to mention that this man was not wearing a security guard uniform. He was just completely out of his mind. I yelled at someone who was idling at a stoplight to call the cops, and then I took off in the opposite direction my sister went. Fortunately, after I crossed the road and ran down a few back alleys, I ended up losing him, but I could still hear him screaming. I doubled back as I watched him run in between parked cars up and down the street, clearly furious that he had lost me. Then, I kid you not, one of his sleeves caught fire. My guess is that one of the stun guns made contact and ignited it. I cut back around a gas station and made for home, as I heard the sirens approaching in the distance. When I got home, I discovered that my sister was safe, although one of her fingers were broken, and she ended up losing 2 of her fingernails thanks to the dumpster lid. I know this story is kind of comical now looking back, but as it was happening, it was terrifying and incredibly surreal. This guy was dressed in a hoodie and jeans and reeked of sweat. He clearly was not a security guard or anything. He didn't announce himself before approaching us. He just immediately started attacking us. And I have a horrifying gut feeling that he may have killed us had we not chosen to run immediately. My best guess is that he was some homeless guy with some serious mental issues. I don't know whatever happened to him, but needless to say, my dumpster diving days are very much over. So the other night, my friends and I were walking to the movies at around 9 p.m. As we were heading through the plaza where the theater was located, I decided to stop and have a smoke in front of the empty storefront that used to be Toys R Us. My friends all paused to wait for me and pulled out their phones, while I lazily peered through the window into the darkened store. I noticed the front doors were locked with chains and a padlock on the outside, and I considered how weird that was, securing it from the outside where someone could easily break the lock and go inside. As I looked past my reflection and let my eyes wander down the rows of empty shelves, I noticed a glimmer of light from down one of the aisles. I moved a few steps over and tried to get a better look at what it was, and when I noticed it again, I realized it wasn't a source. It was a reflection. 2 points of reflected light were staring back at me, like eyes from deep in the back of the store. I spoke aloud. "What? No way!" and pressed my hands up against the sides of my eyes to get a better view while my friends asked me what was happening. The eyes shifted, then vanished, only for a second, before reappearing in a new spot a few feet away. I knocked on the window and called out to my friends. "Hey, there's someone in there trying to freak me out!" As soon as I said that, something large struck the window from the inside, and I leapt back. A metal bracket the size of a frying pan had just been thrown against the window from somewhere deep inside the store. My friends all heard it and immediately rushed over. but I continued to retreat backwards. In that split second after the bracket struck the window, I thought I saw the eyes shift again, and I saw a shadowy figure crawl across another aisle. Not walk, crawl, on all fours. Whatever I was witnessing was either a severely deranged human or some kind of unknown creature. My friends started recording the inside of the store on their phones, but none of them captured anything except their own reflections and the darkness just beyond the window. I just dropped my cigarette and immediately started walking away. Even if it was just some prank, I was done. We saw the movie and walked home using a different route without passing the store. And to be honest, I forgot all about the encounter until recently. I guess when something strange like that happens, something that we cannot explain, our subconscious just swallows it, choosing to overlook it because it doesn't make any sense. It can't be categorized, so it just doesn't reflect on it. I did some research, and the building is set to be demolished next month. I can't help but wonder, were those chains on the door meant to keep people out, or to keep something inside? I'm part of an exclusive girls-only paintball club. Normally we meet about 8 or 10 times during the summer months to battle in designated paintball areas. But on occasion during the off months, we choose an isolated private location to meet instead. When the economy crashed back in '08, my neighboring town went to shit, and most of its residents took off. There was an abandoned shopping plaza that was hidden behind a small section of woods that used to house a Toys R Us, a Kmart, and a Goodwill, before the whole thing was shut down. It's been deserted so long that 6-inch grass is growing up in between the cracks in the parking lot. Of course, there were chains and fences blocking off the property, but after scoping it out, my girlfriends and I concluded that it wasn't being monitored, and security wasn't making regular stops, so we decided to turn it into our battlefield. We broke open a few doors so that we could run through the abandoned stores and make it more fun. Plenty of furniture and shelving had been left abandoned, and we dragged some of it out to the parking lot to use it as obstacles for cover. We spent most of our Saturday afternoon there paintballing and recoloring the place with blotches of red and blue everywhere. We were enjoying ourselves until we heard over the radio the emergency notice to stand down, as someone had been injured. We all gathered in what used to be the Toys R Us stock room. We discovered that our friend had fallen into a shaft that had been hidden underneath a tarp lying on the floor. It was about an 8-foot drop, and was only accessible by a ladder that led down into a basement area. Our friend was bruised and shaken, but she would be fine. A few of us helped her climb out, but myself and 3 others took flashlights down into the section of basement, and we soon discovered something very unnerving. There was a row of iron shackles bolted into the wall. There were scratch marks on the floor and wall, with what looked to be dried blood. It resembled some kind of torture chamber. A feeling of dread overwhelmed me. I can't explain it, but have you ever been to a place where you could just tell something terrible had happened there? The iron chains did not appear to be that old. One of my friends approached one of the scratch marks on the wall. She then turned to the rest of us. "This is fresh." We gathered up our crew and left, making sure to take everything with us that may have left clues as to who exactly we were. We anonymously reported our findings to the police and never returned to that property again. There's always a reason to be afraid.